Hello, I'm going to show you how to make a Mickey Mouse figurine with fondant and gum paste. The figurine I'm making in this tutorial is about 5 inches tall, and here in this picture he's sitting on a styrofoam block with 6-inch diameter. Okay, so I'm starting off with a black fondant rolled into a ball, and this is going to be his head. And then with black gum paste, I'm making 2 ears with a circle cutter. Don't make it too thin because you'll need to put a toothpick in afterwards. It can crack if it's too thin. Set them aside to let them dry. Then roll a thin piece of fondant for his face. I'm using Wilton's Copper Light Skin Tone for the color. Cut it out with a circle cutter that's slightly smaller than the ball of black fondant. And there's a little small air bubble. I'm just going to quickly pop it with a pin. At the top of the circle, cut a small dent out for his, I'm going to call it his hairline, and then place it in the center of his head and glue it down. Throughout this video, I'm using water as glue. Okay, so now I'm going to make the snout. This part is kind of tricky and hard to explain, but I'll try my best to. So start off with a clump of peach fondant and knead it and warm it with your hands to make it pliable. Then slowly stretch it to the shape of his cheeks and snout. But make it slightly bigger than it should look on his face, because you'll need more material on the side to tuck in and seal the sides later. To create this part that protrudes out, add a small ball of fondant behind the middle. Press down around it, start shaping it, and I'm concealing the top by tucking down the fondant. Then we do the same with the 2 cheeks with a much smaller ball of fondant. I'm using a modeling stick and palette knife to shape it. Attach it to the head and use your fingers to tuck all the sides around to seal and combine it. Add water and seal the 2 parts together. After it's done, this piece of fondant should look smaller and more proportional to the head now. Check around the sides to see that it's sealed, and you can't see the fondant balls inside. With an X-Acto knife, I'm cutting out where his smile will be. So you're removing fondant out and it should look like a slice of orange. Don't cut out too much at once. It's better to remove little by little than to cut out a lot at once and having trouble to put it back if you remove too much. Then I'm using my fingers to smooth out the lines. I'm also removing a bit of fondant from his chin because it's too bulky. The snout looks a bit too big, so I'm removing more fondant. With a small piece of black fondant, cut it into the shape of his smile. Then add a small piece of red fondant on top for his tongue. And sorry, I did this off camera without realizing it. And I'm going to flip it over so I can cut the tongue fondant to fit. Glue that on, then use a peach color fondant, roll it into a string, and glue it around the mouth. With a palette knife, press down into the smile line to make sure the string doesn't cover it. Now I'm dabbing a bit of water on both sides of the smile at the top of the string, and with the modeling stick, I'm smoothing the string and face together so it looks more like Mickey in the pictures. I'm using a small oval plunger and it's not big enough, so I'm rolling the white fondant not too thin. So after I cut them out, I press down with my finger to make it larger and more proportional to his face. Cut a tiny bit off at the bottom so it sits nicely onto the snout. Then trim it until it's the right shape or size for his eyes. Then add his nose. With a knife, add the smile brackets. Okay, now I'm adding the ears. They should be dry and okay to work with right now. Trim a tiny bit off the bottom so it has more surface area to glue onto its head. Stick a toothpick into the head and then insert the ear onto the toothpick. If you're not sure where to put the toothpick, you can place the ear there first, then mark where the center of the ear is, and then that's where the toothpick should go. And right now I'm making the pupil, and I'm doing the same thing I did to make the eyes. I'm using a smaller oval plunger. If you don't have an oval plunger, you can roll fondant into an oval ball and press down with your finger or rolling pin. With the palette knife and modeling stick, I try to smooth the face to get rid of any marks. And for the body, roll out black and red fondant. Cut them with a knife and combine them together. I like to trim a bit at the bottom. It makes it easier to secure it onto the cake. I'm also making 2 dent marks for the legs. And then 2 ovals for the pant buttons. Roll out a thick piece of red fondant and cut it with a circle cutter. Then roll out black fondant the same thickness, and this will be his legs. Roll out yellow fondant for the shoes. Set this aside and let it dry for at least 2 hours. Right before putting everything together, we're going to make the hands. For the hands, roll out white fondant and make sure it's pliable. So knead it and warm it with your hands first. Cut out 2 circles, and with a knife, cut off both sides of the circles. Then cut the lines for the fingers. Trim off the sides of the fingers if it looks too wide. Then trim off the corners at the tip of the fingers. Then start rounding them by pinching them gently. Then roll out 2 streaks of fondant, one white and one yellow. They'll be going around the shoes and hands. Now that I have all my pieces, I'm going to put the figurine together. Have some black fondant ready for the arms. So have the body sitting on the cake or a styrofoam. Cut the barbecue skewer and have it going through the body and at least 3/4 of the head, and some of it at the bottom to stick out for you to put it into the styrofoam or the cake. And the last thing you need to make are the arms, so roll out 2 pieces of black fondant for the arms. Attach the yellow string and the white string around the hands and the shoes. And lastly, add 2 white dots at the corner of his pupil. I'm using white colored gel. You can use royal icing or fondant. Then add 3 black lines on his hands. I'm using an edible marker. And now the figurine is finished. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and don't forget to subscribe.